Good morning. My name is Jamie Downs. I'm with the Path Bio section and chair of the plenary session. My co-chair, Ken Williams from New Jersey. General John Sattler. To my right, Ted Hunt, Bonnie Armstrong, and our president, Sue Ballou. Sue, as you know, is program manager for Forensic Sciences Research Program at the National Institute of Standards and Technology in Gaithersburg, Maryland. She asked me not to go through her rather extensive bio, so honoring that, Sue, I won't, but let me say thank you so much for everything you've done for the Academy, and without further ado, Sue Ballou.
Welcome everyone to the plenary session, and as many of you have heard me say during my term as president, whether our members are applying new technology to existing techniques or challenging the federal rules of evidence, the desire to improve our profession is evident. These attributes represent our diligence to the effort, our dedication to the details, and our devotion to the field. Today, this plenary session will expand upon the theme with the help and input of these very distinguished guest speakers. To move forward with our introduction, I now return the plenary session over to the co-chair, Jamie Downs. Thank you.
So when we got the theme of diligence, dedication, and devotion, we started talking as a committee, how do we tell that story? And for us as forensics practitioners, I think it all starts with the victim. With that in mind, the first person I reached out to was Bonnie Armstrong. Bonnie is a co-founder and executive director of the Shaken Baby Alliance. That organization is based in Fort Worth, Texas. A little bit about Bonnie. She is a former kindergarten teacher, which is why we get along so well. She keeps me in line, and I still Bonnie color outside the lines. Bonnie has an interesting story to tell. She started with some really bad things that happened in her life, and she's going to share those with you. But she's also going to share with you what good can come from something bad. Without further ado, my very good friend, Bonnie Armstrong.
I'm a little bit nervous, but I'll get through this. This is the first time I've ever publicly told part of this story. So what do you think of when you hear the word victim? Merriam-Webster defines victim as one that is injured, destroyed, or sacrificed under any of various conditions. The word victim is not my favorite word. The title victim is maddening to me. And yet, here I am, standing before you, and I have to accept that I am a victim. I am also so much more. I'm a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a friend, an educator, an executive director, and an advocate for children. I didn't get to this place on my own. While I've had moments I felt very alone, I know that it was the people around me who supported me, protected me, and encouraged me when I didn't think I could take another breath. It is the diligence, dedication, and devotion of my circle of friends, family, and colleagues that give me the courage to fight back. It is your diligence, dedication, and devotion to the field of forensic sciences that give victims everywhere courage and hope. I know this week you're going to be learning so many new concepts and have a lot of information being thrown at you, and there's no way you're going to be able to remember it all. At the end of this talk, I hope that you will remember that I said this to you. What you do matters. It really does. Let me repeat that. What you do matters. No matter what your role is in this field, there's a victim that is counting on you to do your best. Your professionalism, your integrity, practices, and search for the truth make a difference, especially to that victim. I learned the importance of those in the forensic world when I was a 13-year-old little girl. On November 2nd, 1978, I was an 8th grade cheerleader. If you know anything about 8th grade girls and their cheerleading, it's very important to them. My dad and mom told me that we had to go out of town and I was going to miss the homecoming game, and I think I probably threw the biggest fit of my entire life. I even cried and said, "Daddy, I can't miss homecoming game." So my dad said, "Okay, here's what we'll do. We'll send Mom and Grandma and everybody ahead, and we'll go to the homecoming game, and we'll leave 10, 11 at night and drive 6.5 hours to get to where we were supposed to have this 50th wedding anniversary celebration." So we had the football game, and we finished, and I got to tell all my friends goodbye. My dad and I get in the car, and we take off driving. The drive was about 6.5 hours away, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, my dad got really, really tired, so he said, "I'm going to stop here at this roadside park, and we're going to take a nap." We were in our camper van, which we have a Volkswagen camper van, and I love that camper van. So I crawled in the back with my little Raggedy Ann sleeping bag and went to sleep. About 4 o'clock or so, my dad woke me up, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and go in and go to the restroom. Do you need to go?" And I said, "No." I went back to sleep. But as I laid there, I started thinking, I really do need to go. So I got up out of the car and went into the restroom. As I was in the restroom, I heard my dad drive off. My dad thought I was still in the back of the van because he saw the sleeping bag there, and he just got in the van and drove off. It was a very cold morning. There was frost on the ground. And as I ran out, I thought to myself, I should have put my shoes on. I'm barefooted, jeans and a t-shirt on. There was a man that was sitting in a car, and he saw everything that happened. As I came outside the restroom, he told me that my dad had driven off, and I saw that. I sat down and I waited for my dad because I knew he would come back for me. As I sat there, I got colder and colder and colder, and this man kept offering to let me sit in his car, and he kept telling me how warm it was in his car, and he had his heater on, and everything would be great if I just get in his car. I knew not to get in his car, but I got so cold at one point, it just became unbearable to me, and I thought, I'll just sit in there a few minutes. I got in the car, and the man reached across and pulled the door shut. And the minute he pulled the door shut, I looked down and I realized I was in very serious trouble because there was no door handle. We sat there in the car for a while. I was looking all around, trying to figure out how to get out. The back seat was full of just junk and clothes, and I knew I couldn't get out the back. I just sat there, and he started talking to me. Well, then he kind of made a move like he was going to take the car and drive off, and I just instinctively knew that was a very bad thing for me. Somehow, and I really don't know how, it's just not really in my memory, but I know I got out of that car. I remember just shoving him and just getting out his door. I took off running, but I made the big mistake. I should have ran to the highway. I ran to the woods. And he caught me. And he pulled me down. I remember falling, and I was the victim of a very brutal beating, strangulation, and rape. I remember thinking as he was choking me, and everything just kept getting darker and darker, there was this voice that I heard, and it was very strong, and it said, "I don't want to die like this." And while I heard that voice from somewhere in my head, it's as real to me as me standing here talking to you today. And somewhere in my body, I found the strength to fight back, and I felt this rock under my hand, and I grabbed it, and I just smashed it into his face. And I remember hearing him just roar. It seemed so far away, but just this roar that he made, and I thought, good, I must have hurt you. And then I felt this warm water flowing on me. This warmth, there was just this water just all over me. Many years later, I figured out that was probably his blood, and I'd probably broken his nose. Thanks to my pathology friends, this is probably what you did. But to me, it just felt like water, and I couldn't really see very well at the time, but I managed to get up, and I took off running, and I ran back to the roadside park, and I jumped in a car of a family that was just driving up. And I felt safe with them because it was a mom and a dad and some kids. This random act of violence would destroy my family in so many ways. My mom blamed my dad blamed himself, and they both fell apart. Like dominoes crashing down, my family just crashed. As a 13-year-old child, I could do nothing to stop this destruction. However, I had an amazing school counselor who helped me understand that while I could not change what had happened, nor control the consequences of what happened, I had total control over my response to this horrible event. That thought empowered me. So what was my response? Well, I decided that the worst thing in the world that could ever happen had happened to me, and I'd survived it, and so there was nothing else bad that could ever happen to me. Like we say in Texas, I felt 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and I really, really did. I lived my life fearlessly. I never looked back, and I decided that the man who did this was not going to get another minute of my life from me. I felt secure knowing that nothing else bad was ever going to happen. I married my best friend from high school, and we built our life. I went on to complete my dream of becoming a kindergarten teacher, and I planned to change the world one 5-year-old child at a time. My husband and I decided that we wanted to have children, and we started trying, and for 10 years we could not get pregnant. We tried everything. Then one day, my baby sister called, she's 4 years younger than me, called me and she said that she was pregnant. My sister has a brain injury from a childhood accident. And so I thought, oof, really? And 2 weeks later, she called me back and she said, you know, these were her words, Larry and I have been talking and neither one of us have any sense on how to raise a baby. So we wondered if you and Randall would raise our baby. That way we could see it, but we wouldn't have to take care of it. And I thought, you know, this is the answer to our prayers. We could not wait for the due date of February 9th, 1994. We built the nursery, we bought baby booties, onesies, I went crazy buying clothes. We got lots and lots of diapers. I bought diapers in every size. I don't know. I thought apparently I needed 24-pound diapers when the baby was newborn. I don't know. But the garage was full. I kept buying them on sale. I'm a couponer, so. We talked about names and the hopes and dreams we had for a child. We didn't know if it was going to be a girl or a boy, and we didn't care. There were times like I would think about that horrible time, the rape, and pray that my child would never experience anything horrible. But I just pictured this baby living in this wonderful world where no harm would ever come to him or her, and I felt secure that nothing worse could ever happen. On November 9th, 1993, when my sister was just 28 weeks pregnant, my brother-in-law, we affectionately referred to him as an idiot, but he had a history of violence. He got mad at my sister because she drank all the milk without his permission. And he began to beat her. And he beat her, and he kicked the baby out of her body. He stated that when he saw the baby's foot hanging out of my sister, it scared him, so he thought he better get her to the hospital. So he threw her in the back of the truck, took her to the hospital. The baby was a little girl that weighed 2 pounds, 6 ounces. The doctors gave her a 50% chance of survival due to her prematurity. And we named her Tiffany because it meant a gift from God, and she was. Tiffany did great as a premature baby. She had none of the usual preemie problems, no retinopathy, no breathing issues, no pneumonia. She just did great. The nurses in the unit called her a feeder grower, and in Texas, to me, that made me think of like a pig or a cow. But it was fun because we fed her, she grew, and when she got to a whopping 4.5 pounds, it was time for her to go home. She also had the distinct honor, and apparently she still has that because they still talk about her in the unit. She was the loudest burper they ever had. Like, she could burp louder than anybody, and I'm pretty sure we got some loud burpers in here, but she still, to this day, can burp pretty dadgum loud. But after 2 months in the neonatal intensive care unit, they said it's time for her to go home. We'd been in constant communication with law enforcement and the county attorney where my sister was beaten and Tiffany was born, waiting for Larry, my brother-in-law, to be arrested. Just before, like about 2 days before, it was time for Tiffany to go home from the hospital, the county attorney called me on the phone and he explained to me that there'd be no charges against Larry, for beating my sister because he stated to me she didn't make a very good witness because she was kind of retarded. Due to the massive blood loss she had experienced, my sister had sustained further brain damage, and she had no memory of the days preceding or after being beaten and the birth of Tiffany. She continued to live with Larry because she had no memory of what he had done to her, and we were terrified for her safety. Larry came to the hospital. The hospital required that the birth parents be there. We had medical power of attorney, but the legal parents had to come to the hospital. We went through a procedure, a discharge procedure throughout the day, and Larry complained all day long. Well, why do I have to be here? Are we gonna get to go eat? Can we go to Whataburger now? And I just was trying to get through the day so we could take the baby home. And at the end of the day, the last person that came in was the social worker, and she's actually one of my friends now, but she came in, her eyes were sparkly, and she said, "I've got some news." And I thought, "Oh, what's that?" She goes, "As soon as we're finished here, you get to take the baby home." I said, "Okay." She said, "But I found out that due to Tiffany's birth weight, she qualifies for SSI benefits. Apparently, if you were 3 pounds or under, you got SSI benefits." Larry perked right up, and he goes, "What? She gets a check? She gets a check, I'm gonna keep her." Well, guess what? Under Texas law at that time, because Tiffany had no injuries, he had every legal right to take her home. Later, I got that law changed, but at that time, we couldn't do anything to help her. The nurse came in, and miraculously, Tiffany started running a fever right away. They kept her for a few extra days while we tried to find legal recourse to take, but we couldn't. And at the end, he had every legal right to take her home, and he did. I was enraged. How could someone so very violent be allowed to care for a tiny defenseless infant and our laws couldn't protect her? We did everything we knew to protect Tiffany. I sought assistance from everyone I could think of: law enforcement, our lawyers, the hospital lawyers, hospital personnel, child protective services, social workers, anybody that would talk to me and help me come up with a plan. In the end, we decided the only plan we could come up with was to support Larry being a good parent, so I hired full-time RNs to be in the home 24 hours a day. After 2 days, he fired them. My parents would go by every morning, afternoon, and evening to assist with the 2-hour feedings that this premature baby was on and to keep an eye on my sister. My brother-in-law tried to lock my dad out of his mobile home. In Texas, we call those trailer houses because they're on trailers and the doors aren't that strong. So what do you want to, if the door's locked, what do? You pull harder, and the door came open. My dad checked on my sister and the baby every day. We all prayed and continued to search for legal recourse to protect Tiffany and my sister. And then, I'll never forget every single moment of this day, but on January 28th, 1994, just 20 days after Tiffany had gone home with Larry and my sister, I was teaching in my kindergarten classroom. If you've ever had 25-year-old children, you know it's fun. We don't really get snow in Texas. I can't wait. It's supposed to snow this afternoon. Can't wait to go out and do that. We're all going to go make snow angels if y'all want to, if there's enough. We don't get to do that in Texas. We have dirt angels, but that's a whole nother story. But we didn't get to have snow, but I told my kindergartners, we're going to make snow. When we get back from Christmas break, we're going to make our own snow. Do you know how busy you can keep 25-year-old children making snow? Now, what is snow in kindergarten in Texas? It's a 30-gallon trash can, and they use hole punchers, and they punch holes out of paper until they filled it up. They were the quietest group of kids all those days. And we're throwing the snow all over our classroom and having the best time, and our secretary comes on the loudspeaker, and right when they'd turn the loudspeaker on, it would beep in the classroom. It'd go beep, and I taught my kids to freeze because you don't want the principal to know how loud you are. So I taught them to freeze, and would freeze in these weird positions like, and it was fun. And I'm looking around, all 22 of my kids, they just immediately froze. And the secretary comes on, and she said, "Miss Armstrong, you have an emergency call, and you need to come to the office immediately." And my heart just stopped. And I just looked around and I thought, no. And I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Bonnie, run." And I did. As I ran to the office, the secretary was running to be with my kids. And she just kept screaming, "Line 2, line 2, line 2, line 2. And I was like, I got it. I went into the office, punched line 2, picked up the phone, and I said, "What did he do to her?" My mom was on the phone. And she said, "We don't know." She said, you need to get your power of attorney forms and get back to the hospital because they're flying Tiffany back on the airplane. It was at that moment that I learned I really wasn't 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And I learned that indeed there is something far worse than being beaten, strangled, and raped. It is watching your child suffer. My world shattered into a million tiny pieces. At the hospital, I talked to the doctors who explained to me that Tiffany, our gift from God, our tiny 4.5-pound baby, had been shaken violently and beaten with a baseball bat. She had sustained, and I'm probably going to mess up one of these words, but she had sustained multiple blunt force trauma to her head and body. She had bilateral subdural hematomas, a skull fracture. It had a fancy word, but it looked like a spider web to me. I was a kindergarten teacher. I just looked at it and said, that looks like a spider web. She had bilateral retinal hemorrhaging, and her brain was so swollen she looked like a cone head from Saturday Night Live. The doctors gave her a diagnosis of shaken baby syndrome, and I know that's not the popular word now, but that's what they told me. I asked her if I could just see her, if I could just touch her, and they took me to her bed. And I remember looking at her tiny little 4.5-pound body. Her head was so swollen. She looked grotesque. She really did. But I thought she was still so beautiful. As I looked at her, I took her hand and I held it in mine. And I remember like she just kind of squeezed my finger just a little bit. And I know it's a reflex, but I didn't care. I leaned down to her and I made a promise to Tiffany that if she would fight and she would breathe, I would make something good come out of something so incredibly evil. Over the course of 3 weeks, Tiffany fought hard. She fought to survive. She fought to breathe. She fought to get better. After 10 days, she came out of her coma. And that's her the day she woke up. When I look at this picture today, I see a baby with pain on her face. But on the day she woke up, I was so excited just to see those blue eyes again. I did the craziest thing, and I still don't know why I did this. I told the nurses, I hadn't left her side for 2 weeks, but I went to the nurses and I said, I have to go home. I have to go home right now. And they're like, okay. I raced home like a crazy person, got a bag, put every outfit I'd ever bought her into this bag, took it back to the hospital, and began changing her clothes and taking pictures of her. Why did I do that? I don't know. This poor little baby just was looking at me like, would you just let me go back to sleep now? But it was just something I wanted to do. The doctor sent her home after about 10 more days, and they told me they weren't sure if she would ever do anything because she just really wasn't doing much there. But I didn't care. She was breathing, and I knew she could feel our love. Tiffany kept her part of the promise by surviving. That's what's left of her brain today. I knew I would keep my part of the promise, but I wasn't sure how I'd do it, but I knew I would. The next few weeks and months are a blur in my memory. After we brought her home from the hospital, I learned I was pregnant with my son exactly a week after we brought her home from the hospital. God really does have a sense of humor. I wanted a baby. I got 2 in 1 week, practically. Tiffany's abuser, he began to show up at our house. We lived in a cul-de-sac, and he would just park right outside our driveway, and I'd raise up the driveway to back out of the house and take Tiffany to her therapies and her doctor appointments. And, you know, it was pretty much every day we had to go to somewhere and get therapy, get a breathing treatment, something, every day. And it got to where I'd back out, and he'd hold his finger up and go. And I thought, really? But I knew it was a threat to us, and he had made it very clear to a lot of people that he'd rather have Tiffany dead than with me. He wanted me to be dead. Lots of dead words said to us. I would go and get a protective order, and literally the day it would expire, he'd be back. So I was like, you know, I got enough of this. And right or wrong, I went and bought me a little Glock family. I had a daddy Glock, and a mama Glock, and a little baby Glock. And the next time Larry drove up and went, I pulled my daddy Glock out. And Larry didn't come back. So it worked out pretty well. Tiffany had different therapies almost every day. Her EEGs show, and they still show, that she has about 20 to 30 subclinical seizures per minute. She had repeated apnea throughout the days and nights, so there was no sleeping because you cannot sleep through that apnea monitor going off. She had 13 surgeries on her head, neck, and ears. When she was 1, she got put into this therapy program for children with blindness, and it was there that I met 2 other moms whose children also had been diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome. Melanie Castor and Kim Kang, the other 2 moms, were like lifelines to me, and we became lifelines to each other. Finally, we had somebody we could talk to that knew what we were going through. We could cry, and we did. We could yell, we could curse. We said a lot of bad words. It made us feel good too. We could laugh, and we learned together. We got together once a month, and we would eat Mexican food and have a margarita. And we decided that this felt so good to us, we wanted to help other moms. So we went to Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth and talked to a social worker there, and she helped us start a support group for moms. Melanie and Kim were both really into computers. I was a kindergarten teacher. We didn't have computers in kindergarten then, but they said, we need a presence on the World Wide Web. Now, you have to think back, this is 25 years ago, and you had to explain to me what the World Wide Web was at that time. But for those of you who are as old as me, you might remember the days of no Google. There really was a time without Google, when websites were scarce, and the search engine was Alta Vista. Does anybody remember Alta Vista? A few of us, okay. All the over 50 people, raise your hand. And our URL was like 52 weird characters. They had funky characters that I'd never even used on my keyboard before. And you had to know the difference between a / and a backslash. I'm still working on that. We named ourselves the Shaken Baby Alliance, and I have to tell you, how I wish we'd never used that name. But now we're keeping it. We put up a website, and we put a button on there to join the Shaken Baby Alliance. Now, if you clicked on that button, you filled out this form, and it came to me miraculously through an email. I didn't know how that was, but I thought it was magic. Our goal was to get 12 other victim family members to join us, and we thought we could keep a good conversation going if we did that. And, we said, sure, let's do this. So we did. Within 2 weeks, we had 200 people who would join the Shaken Baby Alliance. Within 2 months, we had 2,000 people who had joined the Shaken Baby Alliance, and it kept growing. Guess who our #1 discipline was that joined the Shaken Baby Alliance? Who do you think that would be? It was law enforcement. And that really surprised us. We thought it would be victim family members, but it wasn't. It was law enforcement, followed by prosecutors, and then child protective services, then medical personnel, and last but not least, the victim family members. We were shocked. At about the same time we were getting all this data in, the phone at my house began to ring a lot. I was silly enough to put my home phone number on that website because I really didn't think anybody would ever type all those characters in and find us, and literally my phone started ringing, and it was mostly law enforcement and prosecutors calling, and I'm a teacher. You call me and you ask me a question, I'm not going to tell you, I don't know. I'm going to tell you, I'll get somebody to find that answer for you. So I talked to a lot of police officers over the next couple of weeks, and I started getting really nervous about how I was going to take care of these people. So I got lucky. I was watching 2020 one night, show that's still on, but they highlighted a case from Salt Lake City, Utah, and on the show was a prosecutor named Rob Parrish, and some of you may know him. Rob had prosecuted a case of a father who had shaken his 3-month-old baby to death, and he was the chief child abuse counsel for the Utah Attorney General's office. So I called the next day and I contacted Mr. Parrish there at the Utah Attorney General's office, and he and I had a 4-hour conversation. I know that probably surprises y'all that I could talk for 4 hours, but I did. And he did. That's what was more important. He did. I told him about Tiffany and our little agency, and that we'd started to support moms, and how we now had these police officers calling and prosecutors, and I didn't know how to help them. I said, what should we do? Well, thankfully, Mr. Parrish had been involved in the movement to bring child sexual abuse to the forefront, and he'd been instrumental in helping develop nationwide children's advocacy centers. So he had a plan, and he said, this is what we need to do. We need to put together an international advisory board. We need to develop curriculum. We need to develop training programs. You say curriculum to a teacher, it's like, whew, yay, I can do that. So we talked about everything that needed to be done, and as we were hanging up, I said, Mr. Parrish, why hasn't anybody done this? And if you know Rob Parrish, you know he has a very soft voice, and he said time and money. Well, I thought about that, and I thought, well, I just resigned my teaching position, so I have all the time in the world. I don't know what I was thinking. Tiffany had therapy 4 to 6 hours every day, but I had all the time in the world. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had an American Express card, and that's like money, right? I'm now divorced, but it wasn't over the American Express bill. But I had that American Express card, so I just called all these doctors up that he had told me about, and we started charging tickets and rental cars. And at first, I was just going to have everybody come to my living room, and then I realized, oh, we're going to need a bigger place, so I got a meeting room. And then next thing I knew, we were putting together our first training, and we had 375 professionals show up for that very first training. And it was amazing. From that first training that we did, we built the Shaken Baby Alliance from the small support group into a national agency, and today we're an organization that's still dedicated to support for families and professionals. We dedicate our time to preventing child abuse, and last but not least, the most important thing to me is justice. From our very first training that we had on February 9th and 10th, where these 375 people came, today we've supported over 6,000 victim family members, trained over 21,000 professionals, and supported professionals on over 2,200 cases. We also have the privilege of working with high school students, and to this day we've educated over 23,000 high school students on how to cope with crying. Our agency provides advanced forensic training to law enforcement officers, legal professionals, child protection, medical practitioners, and other multidisciplinary team members wherever we are invited. I kept my promise to Tiffany, and she kept hers. There she is. That's one of 5 prom dresses that she got to wear. Because she has cognitive disabilities, she got to stay in school till she was 21. She was very excited about this, and she said, Mom, I get to go to 5 proms. I'm going to break you. She just about did. So 5 prom dresses later, this is one that she had, and she calls this her Cinderella dress. And my other 2 children always say, do you ever mention us? My son probably someday will be at this meeting. He's, I have to think really hard to say this, he's a forensic molecular biologist. Yeah, and I'm very interested in this field, as you can see, for very big reasons. My daughter, Kayla, who is on the left, she wanted to be an attorney, but she has now decided that she's either going to be a physician assistant or a nurse, and she's trying to make up her mind. So no matter how they go, I'll be okay with that. Today, Tiffany is a beautiful 25-year-old woman. She attends college 1 class at a time. She's taking algebra. I can't help her with that. That's way over kindergarten math. But she made an 85 on her first test, and we were so excited. And then she took her second test just the other day, and she made a 48. And she goes, don't worry, Mama, I'll get better. So she just has this will to keep going. She inspires me to keep going when I want to quit, when I'm tired, when I don't think I can look at another autopsy report or a photo or see another child hurting. But I know how important it is that we keep going and striving to seek justice. I know that in each case that we get justice, we can offer that victim and their family the chance to pick up the pieces of their shattered world and make part of it whole again. I know that because I was able to do that. Forensic science has crossed barriers. We have done amazing things to solve crimes, but I know we can do better for our children. Whether it's a victim of child sexual abuse, emotional abuse, trafficking, or child physical abuse, the diligence we have to doing our job well, the dedication we have to victims, and the devotion to the field of forensic sciences is important. Take a moment right now to think. Maybe jot down your ideas and make a plan. Ask yourself, what can I do within my area of expertise for children? How can I advance the science and apply our knowledge to child physical abuse cases? How can I make it better for these very vulnerable victims? I told you at the beginning of this talk, I don't like the word victim. I don't. I understand that I am one. I was one that was injured, destroyed, and sacrificed, and so was my tiny baby girl. But we fought back, and we continue to fight back every day so that maybe one less person feels the pain of being a victim. The Shaken Baby Alliance was started in honor of our children. It was our way of fighting back and seeking justice for our babies. The agency continues today in honor of our children and the hardships they endure every minute. It's also in honor of you, the professionals who do what you do every day, who work hard to seek justice and fight for our kids. Your diligence to the effort, your dedication to handling the details, and your devotion to the field matters. On behalf of Tiffany and all of our children, thank you so much for listening to me today. Thank you for your commitment to this field. And please remember, what you do matters. Thank you.
I have to apologize to you, but I think you can understand why this lady won the award that I forgot to mention when we started. Last week, she was named the Gunderson National Child Protection Center's Lifetime Achievement Award winner.